This is a beginning point. This is the beginning of the rest of my life. I got the meaning, and I got to write it down, because I don't want to forget it.
Just win, baby.
And welcome back to the Gold Jacket Podcast, proudly sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog has it all: daily, weekly, and season-long best ball tournaments that are literally happening 365 days a year. Plus, you can play their pick 'em prop games and get 5 picks right, and you can win 20 times your money. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code TNFF. You will get a 100% deposit match up to $100. I'm your host, Gymnastic. You know me. You can find me on Twitter at Gold Jacket Quarterbacks. I am joined, as always, by the other host of the show, the one you probably know way more than me because he's everywhere. You can find him on Twitter. It's Connor Donald. You can find him at Connor10. We are proud members of the True North Fantasy Football Network. Make sure to check out the entire network at True North FFB. On YouTube at the True North TNFF Network and on the internet at TrueNorthFFB.com. Tonight, we kick off our 4-week dive into each key skill position of this year's NFL draft, featuring a great lineup of guests each week. But first, Connor, what is up?
Not much, man. I understand when I put this show document together, I feel like I got to break it down a little bit more just to help you out, Jim, because it feels like such a mouthful. But yeah, it's I guess it's time to start digging into these rookies. I mean, well, I've followed some shows that have been digging into these rookies since like the Super Bowl ended, and well, I guess we're a little slow to the party, but for good reason. I don't need to talk about him for 2 months. But we are kicking it off with a special guest, like you said, Jim. Special guests each of these 4 weeks coming up. And we're starting with Dante Collinelli. You can find him at Dante Collinelli on Twitter. He's an NFL draft analyst who dove into 8 of the top quarterbacks in the 2022 class in his quest for the QB1 over at riseanddraft.com. So we figured who better to bring on and talk about this class of quarterbacks than a guy who really took a deep dive into all of them. And I guess I'll let you do the rundown, Dante, because you are in more places than I think I am on Twitter and on the internet. So what's up, buddy?
Yeah, what's going on, guys? Happy to be here. Happy to talk some quarterbacks with you guys. I don't do a lot of fantasy stuff, so this is like diving into a different end of the pool for me. So this will be interesting. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Dante Collinelli. Cover college football, cover the NFL draft. If you're a Dolphins fan, I cover the Dolphins over at DolphinsTalk.com. So I am everywhere, like you said. It's very odd, kind of bouncing through all these different spheres of football. But I'm excited to talk to you guys tonight.
We will do our best to take your football knowledge and turn it into something feasible on the fantasy level, because that's what we try to do when we bring on guests, because we don't know much about quarterbacks. We won't lie. We don't know much until they get to the NFL and they play a couple years and we see them at that level. So it's good to have you on, Dante, and we won't waste any time because we got lots of questions, because this class is like ridiculously polarizing. Questionable, polarizing. Some people would call it fun to talk about. We don't agree, I don't think, on that point. But first, maybe tell us about the quest for the QB1. What made you think about starting to do that whole breakdown, that deep dive into these 8 quarterbacks? How'd you pick the 8 quarterbacks?
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead, Dante.
Yeah. So it started off really right as like a pragmatic thing of like, okay, well, I have to watch all these guys anyway. You know, I just joined Rise and Draft with Ryan Roberts, who's awesome. And, you know, he's a really great site. I recommend you go check it out. So it's just kind of started as like I had the opportunity to do it, so I'm going to do it. And the original thought process was, okay, the 2023 quarterback class, maybe it's not the best, but it'll be interesting, right? Because different people will have different QB1s, and I'll have the opportunity to kind of go through these guys and figure it out for myself. And then I kind of decided to do this, and it kind of started it during the season and before rookie declarations were needed to be made for the NFL draft. So I kind of had an idea of who was going to be in the class. And then a bunch of guys started dropping out that I really liked, right? Like there are guys who went back to school that I was very high on that, didn't come out. So then I was kind of stuck with this group of guys that I didn't really like. And they were the only quarterbacks in the class. And I had to write about them because I already committed it and I'd already started the series. So that's where it came up. Now, how did I pick the 8 quarterbacks? I would argue that there's only 8 quarterbacks in this class worth giving a damn about at all. And I'm not even sure how many damns I give about the 8 that I wrote about. So I think, right, like I skipped out on guys like Brock Purdy and EJ Perry and Jack Cohn, guys who are going to the Shrine game. Brock Purdy is not good, even though he was at the Senior Bowl. I like he's not going to be QB1, right? So for me, it was just narrowing to the list of, 8 guys who I think maybe if I did the deep dive and I really liked them, they had the potential. So that's where it started, right? There's a pragmatic explanation, and there's also just I had to narrow it down at some point. I couldn't write 12 of them. It just wasn't going to work.
I like it. I like it. Definitely some sound reasoning. And it kind of sounds like it started out as a fun journey and turned into a semi-insufferable journey. But oh, well, here we are. So let's start out with like looking from the top. In your experience watching quarterbacks, what do you look for and feel is most important for translating to the NFL from tape?
It's a great question. I think the answer to that has changed a little bit in recent years. I'm a young guy, but I remember when I first started this, it was, how do you operate inside the pocket, right? Like, how do you read defenses? How do you pick apart zone coverages? Different things like that. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that still has value, and I still think that's incredibly important. But, even, 3-4 years ago, it was almost a detriment if a guy went outside the pocket too much and tried to do too much on his own, right? Like that was really frowned upon outside of players like Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, who had already established themselves as very good NFL players. So I think, the out of structure, arm talent, mobility, those 3 traits have really bumped up the chart. And, I would say they're probably like 2nd, 3rd, 4th for me now. But number 1, and I think will always be number 1 until the end of time, is accuracy. Do you throw an accurate football? Like that is like check 1 box for me. If the answer to that question is no, you're a day 3 player on my board, right? Like obviously there's more nuance to it than that, and there's different factors that you have to consider. But generally speaking, for me, it's, are you accurate? Can you get the ball where you want it to go when you want it to go there? If the answer to that question is no, then we've got a host of other problems that I have to clear before I start talking about mobility and out of structure play and different things like that. So for me, that top of the line trait is accuracy. And that was what was reflected in the QB1 series. The player who combined the most accuracy with the most arm talent ended up being QB1, right? Like that's just how it went.
I like it. And it is a very true point as an Eagles fan watching Jalen Hurts. Accuracy or the mobility aspect for sure. Jim, you got a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we are a fantasy show, we were wondering, what are your favorite landing spots for quarterbacks in this draft? And do you think any are going to end up starters this season?
Yeah, I think I really like the idea of seeing Sam Howell in Washington. Like that's one that really sticks out to me. Would I take him with the 11th overall pick? I mean, I don't know about all that, but I'd get it if they would, right? Like downfield thrower, that's a downfield offense, him throwing the ball to Terry McLaurin. I know they have Carson Wentz, so they're probably not going to take him with that 11th overall pick. But as a future player, right, like as an ideal role, I'd like to see them get a young quarterback. And I like that situation for Hal, where he can sit behind Carson Wentz and maybe Washington rolls him out. I like his fit in that offense long term. If you're looking more immediate, and if you're looking at this from a fantasy perspective, if a quarterback goes number 2 to Detroit, I got to think they start games this year at some point. I find it hard to believe that Jared Goff finishes 16 games. If that's Malik Willis and you get him in that offense, I mean, he's going to be the entire offense, right? And from what my limited knowledge of fantasy football is, the more reps you get, the more opportunities you have to run around and make plays, the more points you score, right? So like for me, like number 2 overall, Malik Willis, right? That feels like a good spot. I don't think if they do draft a quarterback at 2, I don't think you're going to see Jared Goff for 16 games. What's really interesting about the quarterback market now is like there are a lot of teams that need quarterbacks in the future, but a lot of teams have kind of plugged that short-term hole in some way, right? Like even Carolina, they have Sam Darnold still. They took out a $22.5 million 5th-year option on that guy. Like I think they should replace him. I don't know if they do, right? Like I really don't. The Steelers signed Mitchell Trubisky to a 2-year contract. The 49ers traded up for Trey Lance last year. Jimmy Garoppolo is still on that dang roster, right? So like, I don't know, like Detroit still has Jared Goff, or they're paying a crap ton of money to. How many teams like actually need quarterbacks, right? Miami's going to give Tua another year. Houston's going to give Davis Mills another year. The Eagles are giving Jalen Hurts another year. The Giants are giving Daniel Jones another year. It's like ideal landing spots for these quarterbacks. And I don't know. Like, it's just like, I like the Steelers' infrastructure. I think maybe in 2 years, Desmond Ridder could be a guy there. Like, I don't know. Like, it's very difficult. So I guess to answer your question in the long-winded version, I don't know if we see a quarterback start, especially week 1. I think it's pretty highly unlikely that we see a rookie quarterback start week 1. Maybe towards the end of the year, we see a guy start. I wouldn't bank on it, frankly.
I love the point you made talking about all those guys who are being given second chances, and there's still people who are high or think very highly of some of this quarterback class. I think the offseason and everything that happened in the offseason, all the blockbuster quarterback moves, all the, Mariota getting signed again and rebirth, Trubisky getting a rebirthed opportunity, that just spoke volumes to me. That this class, the NFL knows way more than us. If these people are going to this length to give Daniel Jones another chance, like to rebirth Mariota and Trubisky, this class is not something to get excited about. Like, sure, when we talk from a fantasy perspective, you can go ahead and you can draft some of these guys and say, maybe late in the first round, early second round, super flex where you can never have too many quarterbacks. This is a great opportunity to get a potential shot in the dark that might succeed someday, but I don't know.
Roster clogger.
Not there. Yeah, or a roster clogger. Yeah, like I'm in super flex leagues where there's people have 7 and 8 guys, where they have some of these guys who are never going to see the light of day again. Some of the quarterbacks they have rostered. So to me, that spoke volumes. So I'm happy you brought that up, Dante, because that just spoke so much to me. And then I started reading, and I think that people are getting kind of tired of waiting for the draft and the season to start. So they're starting to bring out the hot takes. The stoves are getting hot now, and they just have to say something, and they got to make something sound good. So that's kind of my thoughts. I like that you brought that up. Using a bit of foresight, though, you did kind of allude to a lot of potential guys being out of jobs. In the next couple of off seasons, what do you think will become the hot landing spots for QBs, or where do you think that hot landing spot will be? You spoke to some of them. Do you actually believe some of them will succeed, or do you think there's going to be a lot of open jobs coming up here soon?
I think there's always going to be a lot of open jobs in the NFL for quarterbacks. I think that's just the nature of the beast. There were a lot of open jobs this year too, until Russell Wilson gets traded, Deshaun Watson gets traded, Carson Wentz gets traded, the veteran market gets snapped up very quickly, right? Like there were a lot of open spots this year. I think future-wise, I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, so I'm going to preface that by saying this. Like, I think Tua will end up being good enough. I don't know if he's like this upper echelon elite quarterback. I think he wins enough games to stick around this year, just based on what they've done in the offseason, who they've brought in, stuff like that. I think the Eagles end up being a really, really interesting one, because you like what they have there, right, in general, right? You feel like Nick Sirianni is a pretty offensive-minded coach. They're bringing along Devontae Smith. They have an opportunity to add 2 more, playmakers in the first round this year if they want to. They have another pick in the top 100, another pick in the top 50, and then they have 2 picks next year, right? So they could be trade up material, right? They could go up and get that QB1 next year. So that's a situation I think a lot of people are going to like moving forward. I like Washington too. I think that's a good roster. I really do. Like, I think that they are maybe a QB and like a couple other odds and ends away from being really, really solid. The AFC is tough because the AFC feels like they have a lot of their quarterback situations figured out, right? They're like pretty much every elite quarterback outside of like Brady and Rodgers. And like, I don't know if you want to throw Kyler and Matt Stafford and Dak into that conversation, right? Those are the guys in the NFC, but the AFC is just jacked full of guys with, big time contracts, star quarterbacks. I don't know, maybe Vegas wants to move on from Derek Carr after this year. That could be a cool landing spot for a young signal caller. So I don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty. Houston's cool because they have a lot of assets, but I don't trust that front office as far as I can throw them because they're awful. So it's going to be interesting. There will be a lot of spots, but trying to parse through that is really muddied by the fact that so many teams are giving quarterbacks that maybe wouldn't have got a second shot in the chance a second shot now. Because this class is just so uninspiring that they are going down the road of Marcus Mariota and Mitchell Trubisky, which is just, insane to me, but that's where we are. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting.
Agreed. I like some of those landing spots that you spoke to. And I guess never count Philadelphia out of the quarterback market because they could take one. Well, we've watched them take one very high in the first round and then turn around and trade him away or give him a big contract and trade him away and eat a shit ton of dead cap money. But yeah, I definitely agree with you there. There's a lot of guys getting another opportunity, but though, are they going to be able to make the most of that opportunity? How long will that opportunity last? What does the 2023 class look like from the NFL's perspective? Is it a lot more inspiring that the teams would be willing to move up or the teams would be willing to invest in that quarterback market? I definitely like that. You got some good landing spots there. And we are a Tua podcast. I would like to say that. We vouched for Tua for like 2 years now, and we are feeling the pain now.
To be honest, Connor, like, doesn't even matter. Like next year, like there could be in the eyes of this and the NFL executives, like the 2023 class looks good. And then they go out next year and fall flat on their face. Like, look at some of these quarterbacks in this class. They were surefire, like top picks, and then played very suspect, you would say. Some of them. But anyway,
I'm old enough to remember Spencer Rattler was like the 101 for this draft class.
He'd probably be my QB1 if he declared. Fun fact. He got benched the second half of the season. I thought his first half film was like relatively fine. So There you go. There's a hot take for you.
But okay, so he's not in this class. But no. I read your quest for the QB1, and to be honest, your QB2 was the guy I thought was ended up going to be your QB1, but he didn't. So I was wondering if you could talk about your overall QB1 and what he did to stand out above the rest of the QBs in this year's draft class.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I ended up going with Carson Strong from Nevada as my quarterback one. And I want to preface this by laying out my process just a little bit. I only evaluate film. That's it. I'm not a doctor. I don't evaluate his knees. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't evaluate whether or not he has character problems because those are both things that have surfaced about Carson Strong. I don't factor that into my grading. I'm not qualified to do that. I'm barely qualified to grade film as it is. So that's what I went into that with, right, is I'm going to grade film. For me, Carson Strong was the best combination of accuracy, mental acumen, and arm talent. And those are some of my top traits. Those are some of the things that matter to me. Now, is he deficient mobility-wise? Yeah, no, he's not going to be running around out there. If this was fantasy rankings, he'd be significantly lower. I know you guys like those mobile quarterbacks who can score rushing touchdowns and pick up rushing yards. I get it. Carson Strong is not that guy, right? But I don't grade for fantasy. I don't rank for fantasy. So for me, that stuff holds a little bit less weight. So I understand the concerns around Carson Strong, but for me, he was just the blend of, again, like a surprisingly accurate quarterback. I think a lot of people get on him for being inaccurate, but if you look at accuracy from like some of the numbers that I provide are from our weighted on target charting that we do at Rise and Draft, right? Which value certain throws above others. Throws down the field, throws outside the numbers are more valuable because they're harder. Anyone can throw a screen pass. Not every pass is created equal. So when you look at accuracy through that lens, Carson Strong grades out pretty well. He's the second most accurate quarterback in the class per that metric. I have a lot of faith in that metric and the charting that we do. I feel like I sound like a PFF guy right now, but it's just the nature of the beast. So that's why he was my QB1. And to answer your question about QB2, it was Sam Howell. He was close. It was close. If you look at the rankings, they were separated by like, I don't know, what was it, 2 points or something? Like it was close.
2.2 or something like that.
Yeah,
it was real close.
It was real close. So I liked Hal. I really liked Hal more than I was expecting. I think what held Hal back for me in that offense is just, man, that offense is simple. Like I there's a chance I could go out there and run that Phil Longo offense, man. There are 2 reads and that offense tops 60% RPO, 40% screen, 5%. I know that's 105%, but like, it's just like, it's either a 9, an RPO, or a screen. That is it. And like, I'm sure Sam Howell is capable of doing more, but I have not seen it. And that worries me. So that is why I gave Strong the slight edge over Sam Howell.
Fair enough.
I like it. It definitely makes sense. I mean, you don't necessarily, you went with the accuracy, you hung on to that. By the way, that Chardon is phenomenal. I agree with you there. But I mean, you don't necessarily have to be mobile to be good. If you can throw a lot of yards, then you don't have to worry about, especially the way the quarterbacks are now, where they're throwing like 5,000 yards, like at ease.
Well, they get that extra game, right?
They get the extra game, but even then, some of the numbers are through the roof. But I definitely agree with you there. I watched Carson Strong, and I mean, yeah, mobile wise, yeah, it's pretty excruciating. It is very hard to watch. He can handle himself in a pocket, but if he gets flushed out at all, it's almost Ben Roethlisberger-esque watching him try to run or try to move. But the strength in the arm, I agree. The accuracy and the strength is a thing of beauty. Did he step up at his pro day, which I don't know if it even happened yet? Did he throw a 60-yard bomb like Malik Willis? No, but there's a lot of people who can throw that type of throw when they're wearing shorts and a T-shirt and just throwing a football. Like, you can't just evaluate based on that. But there was some impressive throws. I definitely agree with you there. Definitely a very interesting QB1. Obviously, not a lot of people here from a fantasy perspective. Polarizing,
I bet it is. Yeah.
And there's not a lot of people from fantasy perspective who are gonna go for that. But like me and Jim were talking before we started, and we were talking about like Sam Howell and Carson Strong are intriguing. Why go at the end of the first round of a super flex draft where, Kenneth Walker could be sitting there, Zamir White could be sitting there, Jahan Dotson could be sitting there, and you're going to take a shot on a quarterback who has equal of a chance in the NFL as a guy you can get at the 2-3 turn instead of the 1-2 turn. To me, that just makes no sense to me. You take the shot at the skill position player who's going to have the highest likelihood of succeeding in the NFL, and that just doesn't seem like it's going to be anyone coming out of this quarterback class. And that's just what I can't understand. For fantasy, if you want a roster clogger, like you said, Jim, we laughed and we joked about the 2013 class. The EJ Manuel, Geno Smith, Mike Glennon class, and the comps that are starting to come from that. And it's like, so you want a perennial backup? You want the next Chase Daniel? I don't think anyone's ever going to pay one of these QBs like Chase Daniel. Chase Daniel is a pretty smart guy. There's a reason he keeps getting backup jobs.
Hats off to that man. What's he made? He made a shit ton of money holding the clipboard. I hold a clipboard for a job, and I did not get paid nearly as much as that guy.
So, I mean, it scares me when you talk about, like, when you can actually talk about the 2013 class and compare it to this class, and you be like, do you see it? And you can actually start to see it. It's like,
you can very much see it. You can very much see it. There's been NFL executives that have even come out and said, like, regular draft, they would not touch one of these quarterbacks in the first round, but it's necessity that's driving one of them up.
Malik Willis said he needs a year. Like, Malik Willis went on a plane with someone and said, like, I can't remember, it was a draft analyst or something, and he said, I need a year. I think I need a year before I'm ready for the NFL. You can't say that in the NFL. These people are going to give you first-round capital because they want you to be able to play right away.
You can't
That's
say that and expect to be like 101 overall.
No, but lucky the Jags have a forgotten about generational talent in Trevor
Oh,
Lawrence,
yeah.
supposedly. So we'll see what goes on there. But who is your least favorite from the Big Eight that you studied?
Yeah, my last rated quarterback was Bailey Zappi. Fun football player. I don't see an NFL future beyond a backup, a high caliber backup. Just does not have the arm strength, does not have the mobility, does not again another very very simple offense that does not force him to make a lot of difficult throws. Now I do think that he has accuracy and I do think that he has good anticipation, and those traits can make you some money, right? We just talked about Chase Daniel holding a clipboard for $100 million for the past 10 years, whatever the hell he's getting paid. So, I think that can make Bailey Zappi some money. But as far as the way that I stack quarterbacks is, guys who I have graded on day 1 and day 2, I believe that there is a chance that you can be an upper echelon starter. So for me, that is like top 12 and forward. If you're a day 3 guy, if you're an early day 3 guy, right? If you read my series, you see a lot of guys have 4th round grades. Those are your developmental starters. Those are guys that I feel like you can invest in and maybe they get there. And then beyond that, it's kind of guys where I'm like, I am either very, very skeptical that you are a starting caliber player in a couple of years, or I just don't think you have a chance at all. And Bailey Zappi, unfortunately, was the guy who I did not think has a chance at all to be an NFL starting quarterback. He can be a backup, and there is some value there. Maybe he gets some spot starts. If I had to comp him to somebody, he reminds me a lot of Taylor Heineke, who did get a legitimate shot with Washington. Smaller player, very gutsy, doesn't have a lot of arm talent. I think Taylor's probably a better athlete than Bailey is, so there's some differences there. But as far as frame, arm talent, pedigree, different things like that, I think that's a fair comp to make. So Bailey Zappi was QB8, not my least ranked quarterback in the entire class, but definitely of the ones that I wrote about.
I like it. I almost kind of want to skip this next question because you almost kind of really did it there. Kind of hit it on the head with perennial backups and complete busting out of the leagues. So I want to ask you, who's your most overrated quarterback and who is your underrated quarterback of this particular
Picking
class?
an underrated one is hard because I hate them all. But I would say that overrated is very easy because it's Desmond Ridder. And for me, I don't want to take too long on this answer because I have a lot of thoughts on Desmond Ridder. To summarize it generally, right? Like there are a lot of people in this business that I have a ton of respect for that I think are very, very good evaluators, good at their job, who love Desmond Ridder. And he's their quarterback 1, and they think that he is easily going to be at least a relatively okay starting quarterback in the NFL. Now, to bring this back to me, I have been watching Desmond Ridder since 2018. This is a player that I have covered. I have seen him throw in person. I covered the Temple football team for Yahoo Sports Network. I have seen Cincinnati and Temple play the past 3 out of the past 4 years. Their game 2 years ago got canceled because of the pandemic. I have seen a lot of Desmond Ridder. I have seen him in person. He has been on my radar for a long time. The dude has a cannon. I am not going to sit here and deny that. He can throw the football. He's very, very mobile. That's all good and dandy. My man cannot hit the side of a barn with a football. Like, he is just not accurate at any level of the field for any consistent part of time. And I don't understand how people are just glancing over that. It is very weird to me. And again, these are people that I have a ton of respect for, guys that I have like legitimately learned from them in the past. And I read their work and I value their opinion, and they are just over the moon about Desmond Ridder in this class. And I do not get it. He has been inaccurate for 4 years and he's still inaccurate. And he has had I think he started like 40 plus games at Cincinnati the past 4 years. And I have seen like minimal progression in his ability to just like hit a 15-yard dig route. Like, it is like the same stuff that he was missing when I saw him as a redshirt freshman in 2018, that I see him missing as a redshirt senior in 2021. Like, for me, that lack of progression is very, very startling. Now, I don't know if it's because I have this bias of somebody who has seen him play for so long, and people are just looking at the 2021 film and being like, okay, well, there's a lot of room for growth here. I feel comfortable betting on that. I've been asking Desmond Ridder to get better for 4 years, and it has not happened. So I am very much in that boat. And again, I know that this is a fringe opinion. I got absolutely blasted by Cincinnati Twitter about a month and a half ago.
I bet you would have.
Oh, I got torn to shreds. One of the biggest Cincinnati reporters came after me on Twitter because I made a joke about Alex Pierce jumping very high because he was very used to jumping for inaccurate passes at the combine. That was my joke. And I got ripped for that. So I get it. I hope there's no Bearcats fans listening to this podcast because I will get ripped for that too. But that's where I'm at with it. If I'm wrong, I'll own it. That is the one thing that I am very passionate about too, is that I own my misses. I own my Lamar Jackson miss. I'll own this one too. I don't see it. I really don't. I don't get it. I've watched him 3 times. I've watched him for 4 years. I don't get it.
Yeah, I can speak from experience that there are some very, very passionate college fan bases. When I think it was in mid-season, I run an Eagles page too, and I was talking about Malcolm Perry from, was it Navy? Yes. It was Navy.
Yep.
And I said he didn't test well athletically, and I got ripped by that fan base up and down because they thought I said he wasn't athletic or that he wasn't athletically gifted. And here we are today. They ripped me up and down, and he still is like a 4th string running back or whatever he is in the NFL, not getting a shot. And I remember it was a breakdown of 10 names to watch when Miles Sanders went down with his injury or something. And it was a name to watch that they could have grabbed off a practice squad because that's where he is right now. So I can speak from experience. Yes, there are some very passionate college fan bases who will not hear that garbage, especially for their 4-year quarterback, their prized possession of 4 years that brought Cincinnati to the relevancy that they got to him and the coach. It basically carried this from almost nothing group of 5 to making it to the playoff and everything. So obviously, but when you talk about the playoff, you have to think about that game and how there was a lot of tweets about how bad he was in that game and the inaccuracies. And it's like everybody completely forgets that one game because there's so many other games to look at. But in a game that really counted against the NFL caliber type of players, people seem to forget about that game or just try and put it on the back burner in hopes that the other 10, 12 games are the real Desmond Ridder and not the game that actually mattered. To me, I agree with you. The Ridder one and the hype is getting it. But like you look at the NFL from the NFL scope, there's momentum build in there too. So like we said about the NFL, what does the NFL know that we don't know? Maybe there's something there. There's a lot of talk that he might go 20, that he might go to the Pittsburgh Steelers or whatever, whoever's in that ballpark. It's like, okay, are we missing something? Is there something? Maybe he interviews super well. It's just so hard to tell. So to me, that's crazy, but I would probably agree with you on that point with Ridder now because it's starting to get a little out of hand. He literally went from second, third, like clear day 2 guy to pretty much clear day 1 guy, and there's no doubt about it. But, I mean, before we wrap up and finish with a question about the 2023 class, we didn't talk about 2 names that I think we really have to talk about briefly. That's Malik Willis and Matt Corral, because those are 2 guys who have gained a lot of steam in the fantasy community. Obviously, for their mobility, Malik Willis throwing a 60-yard bomb in his spandex or whatever that day at his pro day. There's a lot of things that are getting people hyped up about these guys. So I kind of want to get your opinion on that. Let's start with Malik Willis because he seems to be the most beloved of them all. What were your thoughts on Malik Willis?
Yeah, I think if I was going to bet on a traitsy quarterback in this class, I think I would go for Malik Willis. I think of all the guys that are just these raw balls of clay, I think Willis is probably the most intriguing. There are plays on Willis's film that are upper echelon type quarterback plays, right? Like it is first round caliber, whole shot versus cover 2, 60-yard scrambles where he jukes, 3 group of 5 defenders into next week, stuff like that is wildly impressive. And I understand why people are willing to bet on that in a generation of the NFL that allows for more of that stuff to be successful. So I get it, right? Like Ritter hype, I don't get it all. Willis hype, I understand fundamentally, even if I disagree with it. My issue with Willis comes back to my number 1 quarterbacking trait. Dude's not accurate. And I don't know how much that gets better in the NFL. And I wrote this at the end of my last QB1 article. I think Josh Allen's progression has skewed the perception of quarterback development at the NFL level. And I think too many people are just saying, oh, well, he'll develop. And it's like, I don't know. Like that has happened once or twice recently. And I think a lot of people will use Patrick Mahomes as an example. Patrick Mahomes was good at Texas Tech, and the NFL just wasn't quite ready for him to be that guy. If you go back and watch Josh Allen at Wyoming, not accurate. And he is like the guy who has developed and he has made that jump. And that's great. But Josh Allen is the outlier that proves the rule, right? We have that rule because Josh Allen is a unicorn player. And there are not a lot of quarterbacks that are going to develop like Josh Allen. And again, like Josh Allen deserves
None will.
For that.
None will.
I think you're right. I think you're right, but theoretically,
I was definitely not on Josh Allen's team. I have eaten crow on it. I have said I was wrong. The fucking jump he made in year 3 after being so highly inaccurate and running wildly with the ball outside of the body, asking for fumbles, and then just turns it around, but also in turn gets probably one of the best route running receivers in the game to come with him. It's also a downfield threat. And Stephon Diggs, it kind of goes hand in hand, but he's the fucking unicorn. You said it perfectly there. He's a unicorn. That 3rd-year jump is an anomaly. It's not a norm that people should be looking at. And now you're going to start seeing hype for Daniel Jones with Brian Dabble going there. And Jones going, he can maybe possibly change him. He's a skinnier Josh Allen. You're going to hear these things start drumming up, and it's going to be crazy, man. It's going to be crazy. You just watch. And then if you have Daniel Jones, sell him. But
it's a really good point. I think, and I wrote this in another QB article I wrote. I don't remember. It might have been the Kenny Pickett one where I said, quarterbacks usually take a jump. Right, there is one major jump. Guys can incrementally improve over the course of their career and get slightly better, but you typically only see one jump. There's one jump in college, and then there's one jump in the NFL. If that jump is not far enough, that guy usually falls, and they don't end up working out, right? So Josh Allen made probably the most improbable jump of the past, I don't know, ever. So again, I would not bet on Malik Willis to make that jump. And I would argue, and this is probably where I'll get the most pushback, I would argue that Malik Willis is significantly worse than Josh Allen was in college before Josh Allen made that jump. I like Josh Allen at Wyoming. And again, this was in 2018 when I was literally 18 years old. So I don't really give myself credit for hitting here. I think this was just, I got lucky at 18 when I didn't know what I was doing. But I like Josh Allen at Wyoming a little bit. I like Malik Willis for me is just there's a lot of tools. I don't see a lot of fundamental functional use of those tools that are effective. So again, I get it. I understand why he might be the first quarterback off the board in this class. I think it makes sense because you're just fuck it. I'm just going to throw a dart at the board and see if it hits. He's got the highest ceiling. No, I get it. I understand that inclination. So
makes sense, but
but I think there's stuff to like there, but to think that he is going to become the next Josh Allen, which is a narrative that I have seen a lot on Twitter, is I'm going to go with ridiculous. I think that's the word that I would use to kind of sum that up. And again, I'll eat crow again if I'm wrong. I've eaten crow a lot over the years. I'll do it again if I have to, but I feel pretty comfortable saying that.
It always happens though. Like people are gonna miss on 1 or 2 or 3 guys. Like every year, not everybody's gonna hit on everybody. That's part of the fun of draft analysts and everything that goes on with them and the thought process and figuring out who's got a good process and stuff. So I mean, I get it, and I would agree with you too. Like Malik Willis was that guy that I mean I've seen the like every year there's like that one guy who has that big final year jump, like the Joe Burrow-esque climb too. So people are thinking, well, maybe he'll be like that, but I just don't see a way that he ends up starting year one. How long do you want to wait with the guy? How long will it take for the tools to develop? Like you said, there's so many traits.
Joe Burrow was a rare jump too, man. Remember, like he got beat out at Ohio State by a lot of dudes. A lot of dudes.
Yeah, and what's nice about that, right? Because Zach Wilson did that kind of last year, but I would argue specifically for those two players, and I would even go back to Kyler and Baker for those jumps. I can go back to their film and like see it, right? Like a lot of people didn't watch junior year Zach Wilson. I watched junior year Zach Wilson. He was not great, but you saw it, right? Like you saw the potential for that jump. If you watch the last 6 games of Joe Burrow's junior year at LSU or whatever that was, his senior year, if he was a redshirt senior, I don't remember. His last 6 games, the year before he made that jump, you kind of saw it coming, right? Like he was getting better. Malik Willis was not that good this year. He really wasn't. Like I have not seen that jump from him. So I agree with you guys. I just think
he was
a lot
inconsistent.
Yeah,
like you saw, you turn on the tape and you'll find 2-3 games you love. You'll find 3 or 4 games that you hate, that were atrocious, that were just really bad football on his part. And I think that's the biggest thing with him. And I mean, what about, before we wrap things up, what about Matt Corral? He's another one we want to talk about. He's another guy who I think shows he's got some traits, but he's got some insane, like his tape is super inconsistent too. And back to your point about accuracy, for me, it was a touch on the ball. This man does not know how to tone back a ball or to put up a lob pass, or like he will throw 3 different types of passes to the same distance down the field. And to me, I can't get, I'm like, man, like what is going on? You just threw a completely different pass than you threw a minute ago. That this screen's not the same as that screen. Like you talk about how screens and how everyone should be able to throw a screen. I don't think I ever saw any screen look the same from a throwing perspective with Matt Corral. Like, I don't know. I don't love Matt Corral either. If I was picking between Corral or Willis, I'm probably going to go with Willis because I found Corral a lot harder to watch. And I feel like there's just a lot more development that needs to happen there with the traits. But what was your take on Corral?
Yeah, Corral and Willis were the first 2 guys that I wrote about, and you kind of basically summed up what I put at the end of the Willis article after I watched the both of them, justifying why I had Willis ahead of Corral. I think for me, the biggest concern that I have with Corral is that I am not bringing Lane Kiffin's offense with him to the NFL. It's kind of a similar but different concern to the one that I mentioned about Sam Howell earlier, right? Where like Howell's offense is very simple in the same way that Ole Miss's offense is very simple. But North Carolina's simple offense is a little bit different, where like Ole Miss does a lot of creating space for people. And Matt Corral is not really asked to make difficult throws anywhere at any time. Now, there are flashes of him making difficult throws, but it's because he had to avoid pressure and get outside the pocket. It's not like he, read front side cut, front side stick, got to his 3rd read, and it's a deep post, and he stuck it in there before the safety got over the top, right? Like, that's not the tough throws that he has to make. The tough throws he has to make are him running out to his left and throwing it before he gets clobbered by Will Anderson 50 yards down the field, right? So, like, it's a little bit different. For me with Corral, it's just that, like, I know I said that this should be minimized in recent quarterback discussion, but I have absolutely no faith in his ability to read a defense. Like I just like his progressions, the way that he goes through reads, the way that he sees the field is very, very problematic to me. And then you pile that on of, I think he has a good but not great arm. I think he's mobile, but not really like elite mobile. And then I think that he's very average in a lot of areas. And then it's the mental processing that kind of holds him back. So I don't know. Maybe there's a version of this where like he ends up being an average starter in the NFL just because he has enough arm talent, he has enough mobility, and the mental really comes with him. And the league is kind of trending more towards that direction. But for me, I just think there's a lot of jumps in his game, especially mentally, man. Like the Ole Miss offense does so much for him where he is not forced to think. And the NFL is going to force him to think. And I am not confident that it is going to go well when he has to think more than he does right now.
Agreed. I definitely agree with that point. And like, to me, the film, like you said, he makes hard throws because he makes it hard on himself. He vacates that pocket like almost every play. It's like you can count more plays, you can find more plays, or it's easier to find plays where he's standing in the pocket and trying to take that shot downfield. And I feel like that's something like, especially like Eagles fans will be all over that for Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, for the first half of the year before they had a run game, vacated the pocket so much. He just left the pocket. He abandoned the pocket. And the worst part about Jalen Hurts is he can only vacate the pocket one way or else he's super ineffective. If he doesn't roll out left, I think it's left. If he doesn't roll out left, if he rolls out right, he's got to run because he ain't making a throw. Because that's just how he was. And I felt like it was the same for Matt Corral. There was so many times where it's like, why are you leaving the pocket? Get comfortable. Find the throw. Go through your reads, like you said, progression. And that's just that to me. That screams trouble. Definitely, I agree with you on that point. Jim, do you want to ask a final question before we wrap this up?
No, to be honest with you, I think there was. I think this was actually pretty good because I know. Come on, do you really want like this? You know this. Like we all know what the answer is going to be here, right? If I ask this question,
how much better is the 2023 class than
like
the 2022
everybody? Like, come
class?
on,
how bought into are you? To
everybody knows
next year
he's going to be like. Everybody and their mother knows he's going to be more bought into this. He's already pretty much said he had a guy ahead of his QB1 in next year's class to begin with.
He was already watching for his quest for QB1 was supposed to be all of next year's class.
Yeah, I actually sat down and watched CJ Stroud a little bit the other day. He would be QB1 in this class by 12 points. So like a round and a half. And that was like me, like that's me guessing. Like I didn't sit down and do a formal evaluation and like really put him under the microscope. I just kind of sat down. I watched a couple games and just like absorbed what I saw and was like, this is good quarterback play. I haven't seen this since I watched the NFL about halfway through the year, just to kind of recalibrate my brain before draft season. So yeah, I really like CJ Stroud. Bryce Young, it seems like he's going to be towards the top of that conversation. I'll just throw some names out there that I like. Spencer Rattler, I think, has a chance to revitalize his career at South Carolina. They have some good weapons there. I still think he has a ton of talent. I really like Will Levis as a sleeper from Kentucky. I wrote about him for Rise and Draft. I want to say in October, November-ish, I wrote about him. He was one of the guys that I thought might come out this year that I would like that decided to go back to Kentucky. He's got some accuracy concerns, but he's got another year, so we'll see what happens. Maybe he takes that Zach Wilson jump that we saw him take. He kind of reminds me of him as a prospect. Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina is really interesting. I kind of like him as a sleeper. Jaron Hall is 25 years old, but he's got a lot of tools over at BYU. So I would say far and away the 2023 class just has a lot more talent. I'm going to be honest, just like on the surface. I have not done deep dives on these players. I've written about Grayson McCall. I've written about Will Levis. And I've watched like a couple of games of CJ Stroud. So those would be like the only three guys that I've really sat down and watched more than like a game of. But I just think that they're better. I really do. Like, I don't know how much deeper I need to get about it. Like CJ Stroud goes through reads and makes accurate throws consistently, right? Like you can watch him get better from Minnesota to they played Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship. Like you can watch him get better and you can watch him throw for 7 gazillion yards and 7 touchdowns in the Rose Bowl against USC. Like you can see that happen. And that did not happen for a single soul in this class. So give me the 2023 class every day of the week. That's all I have to say about that.
I love it.
Anything else you want to add, Jim?
No, I didn't even. I already knew the answer to that last question that he was head and shoulders above it.
When I created the show sheet, I did not expect it to be head over heels, like not even like completely eliminating a couple of the questions on the show sheet. I did not expect that, so that is not my fault, Jim. But Dante, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was an absolute blast, and you gave us a ton of different information. And although you may not be great at fantasy football or have the knowledge, you did bring up some very good points that are worth considering from a fantasy football perspective. So we absolutely love that. Dante can be found at Dante Collinelli on Twitter. Anything else you want to pump out there? You can be found on riseanddraft.com as well. Great things going on there as well. Like you said, they got the QB charting. They got a really great database. They got a lot of player reports. But anything else you want to pump out while you got the chance?
Yeah, if you like the Dolphins, I have a 3,000 word article dropping about Tua tomorrow. It's got a ton of film, a ton of analytics. It is kind of like my coup de grace. I've been working on it for months. So if you like the Dolphins, head on over to dolphinstalk.com. That'll be out Friday morning whenever you're listening to this. So that'd probably be the only other thing that I'd want to pump, because that took me a long time.
I would imagine, and you definitely piqued Jim's interest. I saw him getting ready over there. Like, oh yeah, give me that website. I'm gonna write it down and go check it out.
Well, I got it.
All you have to do is say Tua. Anyways,
thumbnail now, ready to go.
Shout out to all the listeners and everybody who supports us. Make sure you rate, review, like, subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. Of course, shout out to all the sponsors. I was just so tied up into the show that I forgot to give the Viridian Global ad read and the Trophy Smack ad read. But plain and simple, Viridian Global makes the absolute best threads out there. Shirts, hats, all of it. Make sure you go to viridianglobal.com. Trophy Smack. It's baseball season, so I guess if you're in fantasy baseball, you can get some fantasy baseball trophies and belts and rings, and make sure you use the promo code TNFF at checkout to get a free championship ring with your purchase of a belt or a trophy. You can find the whole True North Fantasy Football crew over top of Dante and Jim's heads, TrueNorthFFB.com, at TrueNorthFFB on Twitter, TNFF Network on YouTube. You can follow Jim at Gold Jacket QBs. You can follow me at Connor10. I believe next week we will be back on Tuesdays, and we have another great guest coming on, and we're going to be talking running backs. And I'll let you know who that guest is on Monday. We'll keep you waiting and keep you tuned into us. But for now, see you all next Tuesday.